Awesome, thanks everyone. So, switching up gears here for everyone in the audience and going to discuss mobile apps piracy. Does the clicker work? Slight technical difficulties here. Is there an on button? Nope. No. Esports. Let's talk about esports. No. Well, they got this title slide right. Well,
let's have a chat.
Sure.
So, obviously, we all talk about piracy as an issue in particular. I think traditionally we've been looking at Google Apps being the kind of larger area of concern. Is that still the case?
That is definitely still the case and the most prevalent, but as I'll show you in our slides, it's also an issue with jailbroken iOS applications as well. Obviously in emerging markets, but it is a global phenomenon that affects everybody. And like I said, I was going to reference that more in here. But another common misconception, I would say, it's not just for premium apps, but also for free-to-play apps. A lot of people are trying to hack games and get around things like in-app purchases, virtual currency, getting cool shields or items in games, et cetera, et cetera. So definitely a growing concern. Piracy is something that's been around forever, not just with mobile applications. And I think, as game developers, you guys already have to worry about producing the game and your concept and keeping the integrity of that. How do you deal with user acquisition and growth, monetization, in-app purchases? The mobile ecosystem is very complicated and complex.
Well, there's also the whole area of, you've got the client and whether you trust the client or not.
Right.
And then you've got the server, but also how do you make sure there's a sufficient security between the handshake between the client and the server,
exactly.
to avoid man-in-the-middle attacks.
Exactly.
And I don't know how many of these guys will be familiar with that kind of language, so maybe it's worth sort of, I don't know if we're there yet. I think we're still waiting. Oh no, we are there?
Waiting.
We're still waiting, okay.
There are a slew of ways for pirates to hack your application and figure out how to circumvent, whether it be in-app purchases and validating different purchases, or even getting refunds that they're not supposed to because of the new policies that have been in place, whether it's on iOS or Google. So the point is, it is a rampant issue.
Yeah.
And
the other one I find really fascinating, again, just because I think it's an interesting area while we're waiting for the
definitely
the gold farming side of things. So, is that an issue you look into at all? Because in some ways it's kind of like the opposite problem.
It's an opposite problem. So I'd consider that more sort of on the fraudulent side of virtual currency.
Yeah. But that becomes interesting for people who are relying on ad revenue.
Correct.
Particularly, I think the Wall Street Journal talked about banner ads in particular being...
Yes. So fraudulent campaigns and how those tie back into your user growth and acquisition is already, that is complicated and complex. And the fraudsters are extremely intelligent and have even managed to reproduce retention and LTV to a certain level and going onto certain key KPIs that you're looking for your retention. I'm not even talking about piracy when I'm talking about that.
No, exactly.
Piracy is a whole other issue in addition to this. And my background has always been in mobile app monetization and dealing with fraud, but piracy is also something we want to bring to light.
Apparently they're having difficulty finding the slides at all.
Sure.
Do you happen to have them on a stick?
I have them on my laptop.
Okay. Well, do we have a connection so we can just plug the laptop in?
Sure, it's right there.
Yeah, let's just grab that. Cool, no worries. This is always the fun with setting up events. It's very easy for slides to get mislaid. But how many of you guys are familiar with the whole piracy issue? How many people are actively looking into piracy in their apps? Anyone?
I'll get one maybe.
Anyone's currently looking at that? So this is all fairly new.
Micro display.
Piracy, yeah. So if you were actively engaging in this kind of area, is it a big issue for you, do you think? Yeah. And yourself, I mean, presumably you guys are finding. The rest of you, have you had any experience trying to look at this before, or are you new to it? So if you haven't looked into it yet, is anyone who's had any concerns for their app? No, so it sounds like a lot of you are fairly new to the area. Anyone looking at kind of service infrastructure? So for example, how many of you are using servers to manage content and store inventory and things like that? Are you people doing that? Yeah, a few of you. Does that make you feel safe that you're using a server?
The server authority.
Yeah.
It's not the server secure, the client is that's the question.
Exactly, but at the end of the day, though, the client itself is still vulnerable, and I think that's really, hopefully, we'll find from Dan when he comes back up. But when we know that our app can be downloaded and dissected, we can't guarantee that even when we have server authority, because they can just hook that up to our own server to serve their own ads potentially. But of course, when we have things like an inventory system, how do you sustain the integrity of a game? Sorry, I have a terrible habit of trying to take over a topic when there's a technical issue. So please, take me on face value. But you were saying you were investigating the issue. So do you mind if I ask what company you work with?
Scientific Games.
Oh yeah, okay. So, but so in your area, what are the things that you found most compelling in terms of like we're there. So I'll come back and ask you that question later. Okay. Tan, over to you. Cool. We good? Nearly there. I can see it. Yeah. Whee. Okay.
Okay, awesome. Probably. All right. Well, thanks for that. So as I was explaining, how many of you are familiar with the LumaScape mobile slide here? And I've seen it. Obviously, it's a very vast and complex landscape that we're in. And if we're just going to talk about monetization in general, and how you connect brands or marketers to your content, that is also very, very complex and convoluted as well. Obviously, the mobile apps market is huge, 2.3 billion users worldwide, over 80% on Android, $61.9 billion, and 82% of that revenue all comes from gaming, as you all may or should know. Also, a lot of that is international. A lot of growth is in APAC. 45% of those users are all from Asia Pacific. China accounts for 717 million, followed very closely by India, US, Brazil, and Russia. 33% of the Chinese market have share in global mobile apps, and over 60% mobile gaming revenue in Asia. But what about piracy? As mentioned, piracy has been around forever, whether it's pirating videotapes, and with the advent of computers and software, floppy disks, CDs, and with the internet, obviously, pirating content. And obviously, with smartphones coming in 2007, apps have been no different as well. So this is something that's been going on for a long time, and it's something that people may or may not want to admit is an issue. So what is it in general? Essentially, copying games and titles to remove certain restrictions, or creating ways to fake in-app purchases, jailbreaking on iOS, obviously, to circumvent certain Apple restrictions, cracking, or just simply cloning the app itself. Before, as I mentioned, a lot of people believe that this is only a problem for paid apps, but actually it is a major problem for freemium apps as well. Per Arxon's State of Mobile Security in 2014, 97% of top Android apps are pirated that are premium, followed by 87% of iOS apps. Concurrently, for freemium apps, 80% and 75% of the top 100 have been hacked or pirated in some way, shape, or form. What does that mean from a revenue perspective? some of this data from App Annie. 2017, we predict that there was going to be a $40 billion market for iOS, and $41 billion if you combine Google Play and other third-party Android stores. By 2021, this is going to be much higher. By our estimates, piracy will probably account for $6 billion last year, $7 billion this year, and $14 billion in 2021. That's a conservative estimate from our part of what the opportunity is here and how much money you're either losing or leaving on the table. So what drives piracy on Android? Obviously, Google Play is an open source market. There are fragmented markets for app distribution. China is obviously one of the hugest contributors to this. There's lack of efficient legislation, and due to the open source nature, it is easy to clone your APK and strip out whatever you want. Our estimates are around 20% of your total install base could represent the pirated install base. In some cases, this could be up to upwards of 95% plus. So, common piracy practices. Once again, removing SDKs from your current monetization and or analytics strategies, manipulation of virtual currency, copying in-app purchases, injecting malware, et cetera, et cetera. These are things that affect both premium apps and freemium apps to a large extent. Piracy is global. Like I said, the BRIC countries and the emerging markets, Brazil, Russia, India, China, are where this is highly prevalent due to a variety of reasons. Followed very closely by Latin America and Southeast Asia. These are the largest markets that we are seeing. But once again, it is global, so it's not to say that the US and Western Europe are not affected by piracy issues as well. And these are some just publicly disclosed cases of piracy. It's rampant. People, certain titles and developers have admitted to this being a problem. So it is the new normal. It affects every market, every player, everywhere. There's no efficient way to stop it. How to find out you're pirated? Do a simple search. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of various sites that offer APKs for free. It's no easier than just Googling the name of your app, APK, and pirated version or download. It's rampant all over the world. How to protect your apps from piracy? So there's a variety of tools and ways you can either develop and or use code obfuscation with ProGuard to make it a lot harder to sort of reverse engineer your APK. Code encryption. I think transaction verification in Google Play is really important. There are a variety of ways that people can attack or mimic those calls to the server. You should have your own sort of safeguards in place to be able to validate those purchases accordingly. Other SDK solutions, in-house development of your own protection. There's an interesting case that we saw where a developer actually uploaded their own pirated version of the game onto the pirated portals to try to pull at the heartstrings of pirated users and tell them, hey, we're losing money here. Did it work? No, not really, but it's a really interesting use case. And last but not least, not to toot our own horn, Tapcore, which is the company I work for, we're not necessarily trying to fight piracy outright, but detect and monetize it. So Tapcore, we're the only mobile security and monetization solution out there for app developers to help detect these pirated install users. I think the main difference with us is we know who they are, and instead of trying to fight the pirates, we actually monetize those users with advertising and or convert them back to your Play Store user. This is something that was developed by our CEO and founder, Stefan Kais, because he himself was a developer and realized this was a huge problem that was spreading rapidly. And we would like to provide that thought leadership to everyone around how big piracy is. And you're already busy dealing with developing your title, user acquisition, growth, monetization, in-app purchases, validating those, fraudulent advertising. Piracy is just another thing that you have to keep top of mind as well, and it's going to grow more and more as the emerging markets grow and are looking for content. But yeah, that's basically it. Wow, I still managed to get some time in there. But if you guys have any questions for me or would like to discuss more about piracy, let me know. My email's right there. Otherwise, are there any questions right now?